Well, I sure do hope somebody picked up that phone, because I called it! What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. In fact, I do want to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. In fact, here we are to do a review of chapter 269 of Sakamotodays. And, let's just say, Nagumo man. I hope you ready. I hope you ready to it, because he about to fry you. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack on the side. But what am I talking about? What could I possibly be talking about? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we got a Prime Sakamoto back. Kinda. So let's talk about the chapter itself real quick before I get into my general thoughts on it. First things first, I ultimately do like the chapter as a whole. I like believing or bleeding into the idea that, hey, it's over. We won! Bleach is coming back, and we know Sakamoto Days is ending soon, so let's just put it down. I do love how the chapter plays into it. However, I also do like how Saragi actually gets to do something. It isn't much. It really isn't much. But at least she gets to, like, speak words, you know, and actually, like, you know, be a part of the story. When they kind of just dropped her off and had her still be unconscious after all this time, I was very worried. But hey, even if her last major battle in the entire series was with a nameless bum with a kid, at least she knew that Nagumo was kind of fumbling the bag by only taking Uzuki's neck out. And I will admit, part of me is a little bit nettled with the idea that Nagumo, of all people, would risk it with Uzuki, right? Like, especially since this isn't the first time he himself has fumbled the bag on booming Uzuki. Right? Like, here's the thing. I will give Sakamoto, funnily enough, in his prime, which you're going to get into that, and I actually really like that narratively, let me complete that phrase properly. I will give Sakamoto in his prime, in the past, a pass. Because one, Sakamoto, I don't even think was probably in his prime at that point, because I was still early on in his assassin days. And two, he very specifically was emotionally, like, all over the place because of the death of Rion. And three, Uzuki literally has flipped biology, which he didn't know about. So, like, there are three factors where I can give Sakamoto an excuse the first time. And then every other time Sakamoto has fought Uzuki, he specifically doesn't want him boomed because, you know, morals and such, themes and such, which we'll get into. But on top of that, Nagumo has already failed to boom Uzuki by traditional means, right? Remember, he was the one who gave Uzuki back shots, front shot, museum arc. Which, we have to remember, as long as it's been for us out of universe, the museum arc in universe was probably less than a month ago. If that. The museum arc was not that long ago. So Nagumo already should know that Uzuki's not normal. But I guess the excuse I'm going to give, other than the meta-narrative excuse that Nagumo's a deuteragonist, not a main character, and thusly him booming the main villain, which not only would go against all themes ever that the story is set up, would just be really weird. In universe, I will give the excuse that Nagumo himself is very emotionally conflicted, not only by Uzuki's quote-unquote final words, but also specifically how he felt himself, which Uzuki acknowledged in his final words, right? Uzuki only got to live so much because Nagumo didn't really see Uzuki. He saw the possibility of Rion still being alive. So you could argue that this inefficient, easily avoidable scenario comes from Nagumo's own hubris / his own unwillingness / his own, like, mental blockages, which the character has been well established to have up to this point. So that's why I said it's a little problem for me that he didn't just, you know, take Uzuki's whole dome off, which he really easily could have and should have done. But hey, plot's got a plot and themes and such, and I will admit, I actually do like the themes and such of this chapter. Speaking of themes and such, Shin does show up. I will admit, I'm not surprised. I was like I've been calling it ever since his fight with Kidaka ended. Not Kidaka. No, Kidaka. I wish it was a fight with Kidaka. Not really, because Kidaka's on our side now. But essentially his fight with Tanabata. There we go. I always said I was literally about to say Tanabata, but Tanabata ended. I knew he was going to show up. I do think it's a very interesting point to drop him into this plot, but at the same time, I understand the themes and such behind it all. Very specifically, the future of Sakamoto, his ideals, his morals arriving too late to the fight, and presumably leaving Sakamoto gone in terms of, you know, Sakamoto's morals of sparing people and leaving his back open and trying to have faith in his friends and protect people that he really shouldn't be protecting. Like, that quote-unquote failing, but then the living embodiment of those morals and that ideology showing up in Shin is actually a really, really cool writing thing. And him showing up late is really, really cool. And then specifically being the only person who could hear Sakamoto still alive and fighting for his life while Nagumo has basically entirely given up on him. I'm fed up. up and up. Like, especially as a person who's been heavily critical of Sakamoto Days. And I mean heavily, heavily, heavily critical of Sakamoto Days. I actually really do like this and how it's being used. And it's happening in a way I simply was not expecting. I've been questioning what Suzuki Sensei's been cooking. I ain't gonna lie. Even though ever since the Enemy Museum or since Takamura fell, I've been kind of wishy-washy with Big Moto Days. But especially seeing it now, how it's being framed. Nagumo as the living embodiment, the Deuteragus of the past, and Shin, the living embodiment, the Deuteragus of the future. The two sides of Sakamoto, his past, his future, everything that builds on that. That's some good stuff. It's some good writing stuff, some delicious writing stuff. And you know what? I even do like how, one, we don't know what Sakamoto's thoughts were, and two, how Nagumo does give up, right? Like Nagumo being so ready to just be like, well, he's gone. It's like Nagumo doesn't even want to try. Doesn't even want to fight. He knows Shin's a telepath. He knows that Shin hearing thoughts means that Sakamoto's still there. They could do something. And obviously this is a superhuman universe. Sure, logistically, Sakamoto should be boomed 20 times over. But so would Uzuki be boomed 20 times over. And obviously Uzuki's still around. But with it being the case, we obviously do get the whole idea of, hey, well, Nagumo, you're kind of Deuteragonist, man, bro. You think you getting main villain takedown creds, bro? Who you think you is, Twinsky? And even Kendaka's like, wait a second. I may have not been narratively relevant in about 15 years, but something about this don't seem right. If Atari said things were gonna go bad, and Sakamoto's still alive, and there's an inner beast that's supposedly supposed to wake up according to her predictions, things are going a little bit too smoothly. And then, bada bing, bada boom, ba-dum. Shock horror, you should have taken his dome off. Like, once again, I'll excuse it based on Nagumo character stuff. That's fine. That's good. That's Gucci. I'm eating it up. It's a little bit delicioso, but like, Nagumo. But regardless, Kanaguri himself, the Orlobber to end all Orlobber, hits the, in the movies, until the end credits roll, anything can happen. And Uzuki gets back up. Now, how do I feel about this from a logistical perspective? That's not a word. Logistical perspective, it's garbage. Remember, this man was basically dead. like, carotid, like, literally, Shishiba's was like, dude, his carotid arteries cooked. He was stabbed in the stomach. Like this guy should be fried. He was already taking extreme internal damage from the fight with a Sakamoto that wasn't even trying to boom. Like, legit, Uzuki should be fried. Deep fried, double battered, triple battered. He should be like the catfish I just ate earlier today. He should be gone. But of course, he is the main villain. And because of that, Nagumo's never going to take him down. That's fine. Like, that's once again where honestly, I'm not even like, as much as I said, somebody better pick up that phone. I'm not even really mad about the fact that he's still around, because I don't think thematically it would work for Nagumo to have taken out Uzuki, right? As much as Sakamoto Days' writing gets clowned on by others, and me specifically, I think the themes and such of the narrative are more important to push, and thusly, Nagumo taking Uzuki down just wasn't in the cards. It wasn't in the cards. It wouldn't have really made sense. I wouldn't have leaned and rock with it. So I'm fine with Uzuki getting back up. No duh, Nagumo made the dumb decision, and also there's all the good character writing stuff that goes into that. Now, obviously, what I'm assuming is going to be the most controversial part of the chapter, I don't know how people are going to feel about this, but I've come to like it a whole lot. Uzuki gets up, aura farms a bit, pushes the hair, I don't have enough hair to push back, pushes the hair back, and then Nagumo, on sheer instinct, is like, Shin, you gotta go, bro. Twin, you got it, bro. And he kicks his fellow Deuteragonist right out the frame as Uzuki lunges in. Now, I'll give Nagumo this. He does immediately go to behead him again, but obviously this simply doesn't work. Nagumo swings, he whiffs, Uzuki drops down, seemingly into like a front flip overhead dome swing, which does actually not connect. Nagumo does actually seemingly manage to weave. Actually, no, he doesn't. It's just hard to tell because of like how this is drawn. But this isn't even like a bad art thing. It's just like a me failing to read this properly thing. But essentially, yeah, Nagumo gets hit. His dome gets bounced off the ground hard enough that it destabilizes things flying in the area. There's one pen on one of these stands. It gets picked up by this new Uzuki. He grabs it and then he just and gets Nagumo. What I believe is directly like in like these areas. I'm not sure what these are called. Like clavicles? In the clavicles? He like jabs them both there. Doesn't actually jab his throat or anything like that, like I initially thought in first reading, but he does spluck, get him up in there. And actually, Shin is bamboozled, even, of course, Kamihate, a character who I respect Suzuki Sensei's commitment to the bit at this point of, and Kindaka, all immediately are reminded of the individual that. Actually, no, I think this is Shishiba. This isn't Shin, because Shin's knocked away. But Shishiba, Kamihate, and Kindaka, all beings who witnessed a younger, more powerful, more ruthless Sakamoto, all realize, oh, it's almost like he's back in his prime. Nagumo himself even realizes that this Uzuki is now embodying prime Sakamoto. And I will readily admit, on first read of this, I was like, but in retrospect, getting back to the themes and such of it all, this is literally perfect. Now, you're like, huh? What? Why? What are you talking about, handsome man? And to that I say, what are the themes of the narrative? Specifically of Sakamoto's narrative, as this is Sakamoto Days, it's his story, it's a titular character, and as much as Shin Days is a funny joke that I perpetuated, and many others have perpetuated, it's not his story, it's Sakamoto's story. And what is Sakamoto's story all about? At its core, specifically this idea of progress, and the idea that the previous version of him, right, the one that was an assassin, the one that was ruthlessly taking lives, the one that was doing it all simply because that was what he's meant to do, that wasn't the right way. And the narrative goes up its way over and over and over and over again, in a variety of different means and metrics, to show that ultimately Sakamoto's new way of thinking is better. His way of thinking now, where he spares lives, works with people that he's defeated before, this and the third, it's worked. Think about half, well, not like half, but think of a good chunk of the characters that we've met here. Even Shin himself is ultimately one of the people that's reformed by Sakamoto's new ideology. Obviously, we have Kanaguri himself, who, while admittedly isn't a good guy, is taking care of Atari at Sakamoto's request. If Sakamoto had slain Kanaguri, it wouldn't be here to protect... I said Atari. Lord. Akira. But essentially, we have Shishiba and Osaragi are kind of exempt, like they had been fine regardless. But remember, Heisuke was initially sent to slaughter Sakamoto. Kamihate wanted to slaughter Sakamoto. Boiled wanted to slaughter Sakamoto. Kindaka was chill with them the entire time. Maifuyu, Natsuki, all these characters are characters that only exist in the narrative now and have become our allies because of Sakamoto's new philosophy. Thusly, how are we going to ultimately, in a big bad final way, use Uzuki to prove that Sakamoto's new ideology is better than his old one? Easy. Have Sakamoto, presumably through the efforts of the bonds and the connections that he's made, aka working with Shin, working with himself, obviously, and possibly working with more people who could show up to join this final fight, have them as the collective take down this version of Sakamoto, the slumbering beast, the prime version, the one that is the opposite of all the ideals that Sakamoto has now moved on to embody. And note how I say everyone. I don't think, as much as the whole idea and the concept of the past version of you being defeated by the future version of you is like a good narrative storytelling device, in singular one-on-one narratives, I think in a narrative like Sakamoto Days, which pushes this idea of friendship and camaraderie, as well as the idea of you know, being a better person in the future, I don't think it would make sense for the Sakamoto to go down by Sakamoto alone. Would that obviously mean that Uzuki would be the strongest character in the verse by EOS and kind of wouldn't be surpassed? Yeah, but not only is that not the entire rarest thing out there, there are many series that end with the protagonist not being the strongest in the verse, but also it would just make more sense thematically, for themes and such, for Sakamoto to not be able to take down Uzuki on his own and need all the help that he can get from all the people that he spared and worked with and developed alongside. I think if we're gonna themes and such this narrative, that's the best way to do it. That's the way you sort of get the ultimate narrative payoff. And notably, I have heard complaints, and admittedly, I still to some degree agree with them, the idea that Uzuki shouldn't be allowed to live. Right? Like, Uzuki is such a monstrous threat. And obviously, if he's going to end the narrative as the strongest in the verse, like, he needs to go. But at the same time, for the themes and such, I don't think that should happen. It's kind of like why, in my opinion, the narrative of My Hero Academia sort of falls off the cliff when it comes to themes and such. Because they don't save any of the villains. All the villains end up dead. Like, even the villain that lived to the end, one of 3 major villains, mind you, that lived to the end. Well, no, 4 major villains that lived by the end died anyway in the like extra chapter added on. I'm pretty sure, like in post material, we find out that he died anyway. So like, My Hero Academia sort of spills its crayons all over the floor in terms of his themes and such. So I don't think Uzuki should die. I think he should live to deal with his crimes. I think he should be overcome by a collective effort. And I think this chapter sets up for an actually very thematically satisfying ending to Sakamoto Days. Writing wise and narrative consistency wise and how much sense this all makes. But regardless, in terms of the themes and such of the narrative and how they're being presented and how Uzuki's being utilized specifically as an antagonist who copies other people's personalities, I think this is a perfect way to end off the character. It even makes sense considering Uzuki lost everything to this version of Sakamoto specifically, so of course he would manifest the Prime version, not the one he fought now in the modern day. But I am out of time, so if you've been liking this video, please do me a favor and leave Beast's Awakening in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil, writing off.